Hey everyone, welcome to Wildlife Inspired. I'm your host, Scott Keys. In today's video, a quick thoughts video, maybe a mini rant. But the theme is, the smarter you are, the worse you are as a photographer. I'll tell you what I mean by that right after this. Now in today's video, I told you I got maybe a little bit of a mini rant on this one. It's a concept I've been thinking about for a long time, based off of some real stuff that I have seen over the years. Wanted to make the video, but then this series of events happened and it made me think about it a little bit more. And I thought, let me put these quick thoughts out for you. With my quick thoughts video, what I really want is your feedback down in the comments. So watch to the end. And I have this idea that the smarter you are, and I should really say the more you know, the worse you are. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times people, they are so smart, they can't get out of their own heads when it comes to photography. I've got this idea, photography, is it a science or is it an art? And often we respect people for their intelligence or what they know or their wisdom. And with a lot of photographers, they know a lot. Technically, they know how it works. But does it really make them better photographers? And I guess the point I want to make on this is sometimes I actually think it makes them worse. Now, I have to always say this, photography is subjective. If it achieves the goals that you want as a photographer, then you should be happy, right? It shouldn't matter what I think or anyone else thinks about your work. And I also have this idea that there are very different people. They're wired differently. And so we've got people that are wired a little bit more technically and people that are wired a little bit more artistically. For me, photography really comes across more as an art than a science. So I gravitate to those images that are pretty, whether they are technically sound or not is secondary. And I know a lot of people, they struggle with that. Technical perfection is the goal of photography. We should get the most accurate depiction of the scene, whether that's the sharpness or the dynamic range or the color rendition, whatever it is, that should be the most important thing. And over the years, I've experienced this. So let me give you a real life example. Then I'm going to talk about why I'm making this video, because what kind of prompted this. But the real life example is, and this is honestly true stories. I know a couple of these people, but extremely intelligent and well-educated on photography. In other words, they can tell you, lens, just not even the lens, but where its sharpest point is on the lens. Like what is the f-stop number that lens is sharpest at. They can tell you around sensors. They can tell you the difference between pixel pitches and circles of confusion and, all these things. They just know it all. They understand how the camera works optically, how the glass works in relationship to the camera. They understand readout speeds and memory cards and storage, and they understand it all. And then I look at their photography and I'm like, wow, to me, that ain't good. So real life example, had somebody share an image. One of the smartest people I think I can imagine. And there, again, there's several of these people. It's not just one, but there's several of these people. And I saw an image posted talking about everything about that image. There seemed to be some pride in that. Like, look at what I captured and look at all of this. And it was a tough subject. And this is what I was able to do with it. They talked about, the low noise, the low ISO value for that image. They talked about the dynamic range. They talked a lot about sharpness and why that was shot at a specific shutter speed, very high shutter speed, and a aperture that was closed down, so not letting a lot of light in. And in my brain, I'm thinking, wow, that's a really high shutter speed. You've stopped down the lens. There's a ton of available light. The light's not flattering at all. The perspective for the image didn't look very flattering. The background of the image wasn't looking. So really all it was, in my opinion, was a really sharp picture that was really boring and had no soul. It had no life. And it made me think that this person can't get out of their own head. Like they're so wrapped up in the technical parts of this. Sharpness, got to nail it, got to get it at the lens's sharpest point, which means I need more light for that particular lens. I know that I need to keep my noise really low to get this technically great image. So I need more light. And what we end up shooting is sometimes in these very bright conditions, which isn't, for me, for wildlife, isn't very flattering. And I had this idea for years that this person can't see the forest through the trees. They just get locked in on all this technical stuff. Again, intellectually superior and educationally superior. They really just, again, a couple people really know it all. And I don't want to be harsh because I don't want to put a value like they stink, but the premise of this video kind of is sometimes the more you know, the worse you are. And so I've had that idea, but I didn't create this video, even though this has been in my head. What prompted it is I did a series on photo basics. Now, I go back and watch the playlist. I encourage you and leave comments. Some of the comments, by the way, very supportive. Some of the comments critical, but in a way that was constructive. So, hey, Scott, a couple factual inaccuracies here, and I'm good with that. Listen, I've never claimed to be a high level professor of photography. What I do claim, or what I hope, is that I can take a lot of information, synthesize it, narrow it down, weed it out, and make it for beginners and intermediate photographers. I always equate myself to the 6th grade teacher, not the college professor. If I was teaching a concept in science, something like gravity, I would teach it to a 6th grade level, and I would talk about, Isaac Newton and how gravity works. I may get up to terminal velocity, but I'm not going to deal with quantum mechanics in that 6th grade discussion. So I may teach a 6th grader. Somebody may come and say, well, technically, Scott, that's really not the way gravity works. But for a 6th grader, I need them to understand those concepts. And if they want to reinforce it or even change their opinion about it later, once they've learned a lot more and they're in college or getting their master's or their doctorate degree, yeah, things change. Photography is the same way. Sometimes we don't need to know all the minutia and the details to be a better photographer. I will tell you this, there's a basic fundamental amount of knowledge you need to be a great photographer. And after that, and that's things like the exposure triangle. And people will argue with me about the exposure triangle. I use that phrase because that is a standard phrase. We've talked about it for years: shutter speed, aperture, in an ISO or noise. And I'll get it for that one. I said ISO and noise together, and they're really not the same thing. But I'll say ISO. So once you get past that, yeah, you need to know a little bit about your camera. You really want to know how it works. Functionally is more important than technically. What works to capture a situation. And you don't need to know a ton to be a great photographer. Yes, it helps sometimes. Knowing specifics about your camera can help. So again, when I did this series on photo basics, I tried to break it down. I synthesized a lot of information, try to break it down and make it easy and digestible for people to understand, put some graphics up there, and then down the comments. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And I even know on some graphs, I'll say it, I know I'm wrong. Like, I know this isn't the right graph, but it illustrates the point of what I'm trying to talk about. So that precipitated me to think, I got to be careful with this because there's an emotional response sometimes when you're a content creator, you're on social media, people start commenting and you feel attacked or criticized. There's an emotional response to attack. And I read this comment and I think, this guy sucks. Like, this guy making comments is probably a terrible photographer. I bet my paycheck, if you hung a gallery of that work, it's probably boring, mundane, and has no artistic value to it. And I say that based off of some past experience, which is typically the smartest people in the room weren't always the greatest, or I should say most artistic photographers for sure. So I put that out there that I do, and I'm not saying there aren't exceptions to the rule, but I do believe a lot of times we get so technically focused and we watch gear reviews, and God, I do them. I do gear reviews. I want people to have educated decisions. And I've bought some cameras that as a wildlife photographer, they would hurt my craft. They would. They just don't perform the right way. I've had some lenses where I thought, oh, a sharp lens doesn't really matter. And I've taken it out in the field and I was like, wow, this is going to be tough. This is real. I took one of my older lenses out and it was like, I don't know if I could have a lot of success with this particular lens and sometimes with this particular body. But once we get the basics out of the way and you're shooting a standard capable lens and a capable body, really the rest is the photographer. And that's a discussion for another day. You know, how much does gear matter versus craft? But for me, I will tell you this: understand basics. Don't worry about real specific technical details, as they will often bog you down. Sometimes, sometimes to your own detriment. Sometimes knowing too much influences how you might shoot. The best example I can have of this is around that light. And when I know that more available light for photography technically is better, in other words, I can bring my camera noise down, I can increase my shutter speeds, especially for wildlife. Like that, those are great things. Less noise in your final image, better dynamic range, sharper pictures. Wow, that is great. But if I'm thinking that way, maybe I don't go out and shoot wildlife until 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning when the sun is fully up, and I miss all of the beautiful light that happened. I'm fanatic about light, and I think that makes great images. Pretty light makes pretty images. And so the technical stuff, while I like to know it, I don't think is the first priority. Certainly not for me. And I'd like you to think about that. Let me know down in the comments. Do you agree? Have you met the person that knows everything but can't show you their work? You know, I'm always suspicious when somebody tells me how great they are, how knowledgeable they are, and then there's no gallery to look at. Because a lot of times I want to go in and see, okay, like what am I looking at? What is this person? How should I be influenced by this person's opinion? And if they have great work, it really means a lot to me. So certainly a lot of great photographers, and I'll put this out there. If you had the master's degree electro engineer who understood every aspect of photography and went to school for it, I bet you I could take a 15-year-old with a super artistic eye who works really hard. And I'm talking about wildlife photography for this one, because I know these, and I don't want to use the term kid, but I know these young people, young men and women who are just outstanding photographers, never went to school, have a very basic understanding of how the thing works, the body, the lens, a very basic understanding, and their work is just phenomenal. And it has to do with their artistic ability and sometimes with their work ethic, how much time they put into their craft, and how much they study not just the camera and the body, but for me as a wildlife photographer, how much they study their subjects. So that to me is what's important. That to me is the big deal. Love to do the photo basics videos. Never want to get deeper than that because I don't think there's a huge value in that. I don't want to encourage people to learn and watch YouTube videos to be a better photographer. I don't want to encourage people to read more technical data or join more bulletin boards or forums to discuss the intricacies of a camera or a body or a lens or a frame rate or a pixel pitch or whatever it is. That's not going to make you a better photographer. For me as a wildlife photographer, what will make people better? Learn locations and subjects and behavior and light. You learn that stuff. I'd tell you, I could put an average camera with an average lens in your hands. And if you master the other stuff, you have a much better chance of producing visually stunning images at the end of the day. So that is my preface for this video. Little bit of a mini rant, not too bad. I think I did okay with this one. I hope I made the point though. And let me know down in the comments if you like that. Now, I've got a lot of videos that I do. I talked about the Photo Basics playlist. So I got a lot of playlists out there. There's some quick thoughts, kind of like this, where I encourage your feedback and your comments. So definitely let me know down in the comments. Just subscribe to the channel and hit that little alert or that bell for notifications. That'll let you know when I have a new video out. Typically, I'm putting out one video a week. Sometimes, 3, 4 a month is about average for me. And I love your support. I love your comments. Thank you so much. I may not say it enough, but it really does matter to me that you've taken the time to follow the channel, subscribed, and leave those comments for me. I read every comment on every video. Don't get the chance to reply to all of them anymore, but I do read every comment. Sincerely, I appreciate it. So thank you to my subscribers. I also want to say thank you to all my patrons over on my Patreon site. Super, super thankful for them as well. So you guys have a great day. Thanks for tuning into this one. And as always, I hope we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.